There is a moment that almost everyone experiences at some point in life. A quiet moment when the noise disappears, the distractions become less convincing, and a difficult question rises to the surface. Why am I still here? Not physically, not literally, but mentally, emotionally, professionally, personally. Why do I keep thinking about change but struggle to create it? Why do I keep making plans but return to the same patterns? Why do I understand what I should do, yet somehow continue doing what keeps me exactly where I do not want to be? This question is uncomfortable because it removes the easy explanations. It is easier to believe that the reason we are stuck is outside of us. Maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe the circumstances are unfair. Maybe we need more information, more motivation, more confidence, more resources, more approval. And sometimes, external circumstances genuinely matter. Life contains challenges that are real. People face different starting points, different responsibilities, different limitations, and different opportunities. But there is another truth that requires deeper honesty. Many times, the biggest obstacle between where we are and where we want to be is not a lack of ability. It is a pattern of thinking, a pattern of reacting, a pattern of avoiding discomfort, a pattern of protecting an old version of ourselves, even when that version is no longer helping us grow. Being stuck rarely feels like a dramatic failure. It often feels ordinary. It appears in small moments that seem harmless. The decision you keep delaying, the conversation you keep avoiding, the habit you keep promising to change next week, the skill you keep saying you will learn when life becomes less busy, the dream you keep adjusting downward because trying feels more uncomfortable than staying the same. The strange reality is that many people are not stuck because they lack ambition. They are stuck because a part of them has learned to prefer familiarity over transformation. The human mind naturally seeks stability. It notices risks. It remembers previous failures. It creates shortcuts to conserve energy. These abilities help us function, but they can also create invisible barriers when we attempt meaningful change. A person can sincerely want a different life, while unconsciously protecting the habits that maintain the current one. This is why simply knowing what to do is often not enough. Knowledge is powerful, but knowledge without action becomes another form of delay. You can read books about discipline and still avoid difficult tasks. You can understand psychology and still repeat emotional patterns. You can know the importance of patience and still become frustrated when progress takes time. The gap between understanding and transformation is where many people remain trapped. They are not lacking awareness. They are lacking alignment. Their goals say one thing, their daily choices say another. Their intentions point toward growth. Their routines preserve comfort. And slowly, without realizing it, they create a life where their future depends on decisions they keep postponing. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. The brutal truth is not that you are incapable. This may sound strange, but every pattern exists for a reason. A person who avoids difficult conversations may be protecting themselves from rejection. A person who procrastinates may be protecting themselves from the possibility of failure. A person who refuses to begin may be protecting themselves from discovering that the journey is harder than expected. A person who constantly seeks perfection may be protecting themselves from criticism. The problem is not that these protective mechanisms exist. The problem is when they continue controlling decisions long after they stop being useful. Sometimes the thing that keeps you safe also keeps you small. Imagine standing in front of a closed door. You know there is something valuable on the other side. A better opportunity, a stronger version of yourself, a new direction. But every time you reach for the handle, your mind creates reasons to wait. Maybe tomorrow, maybe when you feel more prepared, maybe when everything is clearer, maybe when fear disappears. But fear rarely disappears before action. Confidence is often built after repeated evidence that you can handle challenges. Many people wait for confidence before they move. But movement is often what creates confidence. They wait to become disciplined before acting disciplined. They wait to become motivated before starting. They wait to feel ready before taking the first step. But readiness is often not a feeling that arrives before growth. It is something developed through participation in the process. The person who becomes strong is usually not the person who had no doubts. It is often the person who learned to move while doubts were present. This does not mean ignoring emotions or forcing yourself into unhealthy pressure. It means learning the difference between listening to yourself and being controlled by every temporary feeling. Your emotions provide information. They do not always provide instructions. Feeling uncomfortable does not automatically mean you are making the wrong choice. Feeling afraid does not automatically mean you should stop. Feeling uncertain does not automatically mean you are unprepared. Growth requires a relationship with discomfort, not a relationship based on suffering, not a relationship based on punishment, a relationship based on understanding. Discomfort is often the signal that you are entering unfamiliar territory, and unfamiliar territory is where new abilities are developed. Think about any skill you respect: a musician learning an instrument, an athlete improving performance, a professional developing expertise, a person building healthier relationships. Nobody begins at mastery. Every person starts with awkward attempts, mistakes, confusion, and uncertainty. The difference is that some people interpret these experiences as evidence that they should stop. Others interpret them as part of the process. The meaning you assign to struggle influences the way you respond to it. A difficult moment can become proof that you are failing, or it can become evidence that you are practicing something new. The event may be the same. The interpretation changes the experience. This is one of the most important shifts in personal growth. You do not need to become a completely different person overnight. You need to become more honest about the person you are repeatedly becoming through your choices. Because your future is not built in a single dramatic decision. It is built through repeated ordinary actions. The 5 minutes you spend learning, the decision to finish what you started, the moment you choose patience instead of reaction, the time you protect your attention instead of giving it away, the promise you make to yourself and actually keep. Small choices appear insignificant because they are small, but repeated consistently, they become identity, and identity influences behavior. A person who repeatedly keeps commitments to themselves begins to see themselves differently. They begin to trust their own decisions. They begin to rely less on temporary motivation. They begin building evidence that change is possible. The opposite is also true. Every time you repeatedly ignore your own intentions, you collect evidence that your words and actions do not match. Over time, this creates internal conflict. You start doubting yourself. You start questioning your ability. You start believing that maybe you are simply someone who cannot change. But that conclusion is often based on patterns, not potential. A person is not defined by their previous attempts. A person is shaped by what they practice from this moment forward. The question is not, why have I failed before? A better question is, what pattern has been repeating, and what is it protecting me from? Because behind many forms of being stuck is an unexamined fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of uncertainty, fear of losing comfort, fear of discovering that change requires more patience than expected. Once you understand the pattern, you gain a new ability. You can respond instead of simply repeat. You can choose instead of automatically react. You can build instead of constantly restart. The purpose of this journey is not to create a perfect version of yourself. Perfection creates another trap. The purpose is to become a person who can face reality clearly, take responsibility honestly, and continue moving forward despite difficulty. The brutal truth about being stuck is that the solution is often not hidden somewhere outside you. It begins with a deeper conversation inside you. A conversation where excuses become observations, where fear becomes information, where mistakes become lessons, where responsibility becomes freedom. Because the moment you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What can I learn from this, and what can I do next?" something changes. You stop waiting for life to become easier before you begin. You begin becoming the person who can handle what comes next. And that is where real progress starts. Not with a dramatic transformation, not with a sudden burst of motivation, but with a quiet decision. A decision to finally see the patterns that have been shaping your life, and a decision to start shaping them intentionally. There is a hidden misunderstanding about being stuck. Many people imagine being stuck as a complete lack of movement. They picture someone who has given up, someone who has stopped trying, someone who no longer cares about progress. But in reality, being stuck often looks very different. A person can be busy and still be stuck. A person can be constantly planning and still be stuck. A person can consume endless information, collect advice, watch motivational videos, and have conversations about improvement while remaining in the same place. Movement is not always progress. Sometimes movement is simply a way of avoiding the deeper work. A person can spend years rearranging the surface of their life while avoiding the foundation. They change their tools but not their habits. They change their goals but not their mindset. They search for a new method while refusing to examine the patterns that make every method difficult to maintain. This is one of the most challenging truths about personal growth. The problem is not always that you do not know enough. Sometimes the problem is that you know exactly what needs to change, but changing it requires confronting a part of yourself that you have been protecting for a long time. The human mind is remarkable because it adapts. It creates routines that make daily life easier. It develops emotional responses based on previous experiences. It creates beliefs about what feels safe, what feels possible, and what feels threatening. These systems help us navigate life, but they can also become outdated. A strategy that once helped you survive a difficult period may become a limitation when your circumstances change. Avoiding risk may have protected you from disappointment in the past, but later, that same avoidance may prevent you from pursuing meaningful opportunities. Staying quiet may have helped you avoid conflict before, but later, that same silence may prevent you from expressing your needs clearly. Seeking approval may have helped you feel accepted before, but later, that same habit may cause you to measure your worth through the reactions of others. The challenge is that old patterns rarely announce themselves. They do not arrive with a warning sign saying, "This behavior is limiting your future." They usually feel reasonable. They feel familiar. They feel like common sense. That is why self-awareness matters. Without awareness, we often defend the very patterns that keep us from progressing. We create explanations that make our current behavior feel justified. I am waiting for the right time. I need more preparation. I will start when things calm down. I am just not naturally disciplined. I have always been this way. These statements may feel true because they describe your current experience. But describing where you are is not the same as defining where you can go. One of the most important psychological shifts is understanding the difference between identity and behavior. Many people turn temporary patterns into permanent labels. And they say, "I am lazy. I am not confident. I am bad at commitment. I am someone who always quits." But these statements can create a psychological prison. They transform actions into identity. They make change feel unnatural because the person begins defending a story about who they are. A more useful perspective is this: I have developed habits that create these results. That sentence creates space. If a result comes from a pattern, then a different pattern can create a different result. This does not mean change is easy. It means change is possible through deliberate practice. The person who struggles with discipline is not necessarily a person without discipline. They may simply be a person who has not built systems that support disciplined behavior. The person who struggles with confidence is not necessarily a person without ability. They may simply lack enough experiences where they have acted despite uncertainty and learned from the outcome. The person who struggles with consistency is not necessarily incapable of commitment. They may need to understand the emotional triggers that cause them to abandon their efforts. Growth begins when you stop attacking yourself and start studying yourself. This distinction is powerful. Self-criticism often creates shame. Self-awareness creates understanding. Shame says, something is wrong with me. Awareness says, something in my approach needs to be understood. One creates hopelessness, the other creates possibility. Many people remain stuck because they are fighting the wrong battle. They are trying to force themselves forward without understanding what keeps pulling them backward. Imagine trying to drive a car while the emergency brake is still engaged. You can press the accelerator harder. You can increase effort. You can become frustrated, but the vehicle will continue struggling because there is resistance that has not been addressed. In personal growth, resistance often comes from hidden conflicts. A person may want success, but fear responsibility. They may want freedom, but fear uncertainty. They may want recognition, but fear criticism. They may want change, but fear losing the comfort of what is familiar. These conflicts do not make someone weak. They make someone human. Almost every meaningful goal contains some form of tension. Growth requires leaving something behind. Sometimes it is a habit. Sometimes it is an old belief. Sometimes it is an outdated version of yourself. And the mind naturally asks a question: if I let go of this, what happens next? That question creates hesitation, because the familiar, even when imperfect, provides predictability. The unknown requires adaptation. This is why many people choose a familiar frustration over an unfamiliar possibility. They know how to live with the current problem. They do not yet know how to handle the new challenges that come with change. A person may complain about their routine but still resist creating a new one. They may dislike their situation but avoid taking steps that could improve it. They may feel trapped but hesitate when opportunities appear. Not because they do not want a better life, because every improvement requires adjustment, and adjustment requires energy. The brain often prefers conserving energy over pursuing uncertain rewards. This is why relying only on motivation is unreliable. Motivation changes, emotions change, energy levels change. A person who depends entirely on feeling inspired will struggle because inspiration is temporary. Progress requires something deeper. It requires commitment to a process. It requires building structures that make positive actions easier to repeat. The strongest transformations are often not created through intense moments. They are created through ordinary consistency. A person does not become healthier because of one perfect day. They become healthier because they repeatedly make choices that support their well-being. A person does not become skilled because of one moment of effort. They become skilled because they continue practicing after the excitement disappears. And a person does not develop resilience because they avoid difficulty. They develop resilience because they learn they can respond to difficulty. This is why being stuck should not be viewed only as a problem. It can also be information. It can reveal where attention is needed. It can show you the difference between what you say matters and what your actions demonstrate matters. Your repeated behavior is a form of feedback, not a judgment, not a permanent definition. Feedback. If you repeatedly delay important tasks, there is information there. If you repeatedly abandon goals, there is information there. If you repeatedly return to the same frustrations, there is information there. And the goal is not to criticize the pattern. The goal is to understand the pattern well enough to change it. Because you cannot transform what you refuse to examine. Many people want a new result while keeping the same relationship with time, attention, effort, and responsibility. But different outcomes usually require different inputs. A different life is rarely built through occasional decisions. It is built through repeated choices that eventually become normal. The person you become is shaped quietly, not only during major moments, especially during ordinary moments, when nobody is watching, when there is no immediate reward, when the easier option is available. Those moments reveal the systems that are actually guiding your life. And this is where the uncomfortable truth becomes valuable. Being stuck is not proof that you are incapable. It is often proof that something within your current system needs to evolve. The question is not whether you have flaws. Everyone has patterns that require improvement. The question is whether you are willing to become curious enough to understand them. Because curiosity creates distance between you and your automatic reactions. It gives you the ability to observe your thoughts instead of immediately obeying them. It allows you to ask, is this choice moving me toward the person I want to become? Or, is this choice simply protecting me from temporary discomfort? That question alone can create a turning point, because awareness is the beginning of change. Before a person changes a habit, they must notice it. Before they change a belief, they must question it. Before they build a new identity, they must understand the old one. The journey out of being stuck begins with seeing clearly, not judging yourself, not creating excuses, not searching for someone else to blame. Simply seeing your patterns, seeing your choices, seeing your fears, seeing your potential. And from that place of clarity, progress becomes less about forcing yourself into a different person. It becomes about removing what has been preventing your natural growth. The path forward does not begin with becoming someone else. It begins with finally understanding yourself. And once you understand the forces shaping your decisions, you gain something more valuable than temporary motivation. You gain direction, because a person with direction can move slowly and still make progress. But a person without awareness can move quickly and still remain lost. The first step is not speed. The first step is clarity, and clarity changes everything. There is a moment in every meaningful transformation where a person must confront a difficult realization. The obstacle they have been searching for may not be somewhere outside them. It may be hidden within the way they approach their own life. This does not mean every problem is self-created. It does not mean circumstances do not matter. It does not mean personal responsibility replaces compassion for the challenges people face. It means that at some point, growth requires examining the part of the situation that belongs to you, because responsibility is not punishment. Responsibility is power. When you accept that your choices, habits, and responses influence your direction, you regain the ability to participate in creating change. Without responsibility, a person becomes dependent on circumstances improving first. With responsibility, a person begins asking a different question. What is within my ability to influence? That question separates helplessness from progress. Many people remain stuck because they are waiting for a perfect environment. They believe they need more time, more confidence, more support, more resources, or fewer obstacles before they begin. But the reality is that almost every person who creates meaningful progress begins with imperfect conditions. They begin while uncertain. They begin while learning. They begin while carrying doubts. The difference is not that they have eliminated every obstacle. The difference is that they stopped allowing obstacles to become permanent reasons for inaction. One of the most powerful forms of being stuck is what psychologists often describe as avoidance. Avoidance is interesting because it usually feels like relief in the short term. When you avoid a difficult task, you experience immediate comfort. When you avoid a challenging conversation, you experience temporary peace. When you avoid making a decision, you experience temporary freedom from pressure. But the cost appears later. The task remains. The conversation remains. The decision remains. And often, the emotional weight becomes heavier because your mind continues carrying unfinished responsibilities. Avoidance creates a strange cycle. The thing you avoid becomes more intimidating. The more intimidating it becomes, the more you avoid it. The more you avoid it, the more evidence your mind collects that the situation is difficult. Eventually, the obstacle becomes larger in your imagination than it was in reality. This is why taking action, even in a small way, can be so powerful. Action provides information. It replaces assumptions with experience. A person who fears starting a project may imagine endless problems. But once they begin, They discover what the actual problems are. A person who fears a difficult conversation may imagine every possible negative outcome, but a respectful conversation often reveals realities that were unclear before. A person who fears learning a new skill may assume they are not capable, but practice provides evidence that ability can develop. Movement creates clarity. Waiting often creates more uncertainty. This does not mean rushing into every decision. Thoughtful reflection matters. Preparation matters. But there is a difference between preparation and hiding. Preparation improves your chances. Hiding protects you from temporary discomfort. The challenge is learning to recognize which one you are doing. Many people confuse thinking with progress. They spend hours analyzing. They create detailed plans. They imagine future scenarios. They collect information. And these activities can be valuable, but there comes a point where more thinking becomes another form of delay. The mind can create the illusion of progress because planning feels productive, but a plan that never becomes action remains only a possibility. A bridge is not useful because someone designed it beautifully. It becomes useful when people actually cross it. The same principle applies to personal growth. Your ideas matter. Your intentions matter. Your goals matter, but they become meaningful when they influence your behavior. Another reason people remain stuck is because they underestimate the power of small, repeated actions. Many people look for dramatic changes. They want a single moment that transforms everything, a sudden realization, a powerful burst of motivation, a perfect opportunity, but most lasting changes are quieter. They happen through accumulation. A person improves their health through repeated choices. A person develops expertise through repeated practice. A person builds trust through repeated reliability. A person strengthens discipline through repeated commitments. The small action appears insignificant because the result is not immediate, but time amplifies consistency. A single decision may not change your life, but hundreds of aligned decisions can change the direction of your life. This is why patience is an important part of progress. The modern world often encourages immediate results. People compare their beginning to someone else's years of effort. They see the visible outcome but not the invisible process. They see the achievement but not the repetition. They see confidence but not the uncertainty that came before. This creates unrealistic expectations. A person begins believing that if progress feels slow, something must be wrong. But slow progress is still progress. Growth often happens beneath the surface before it becomes visible. A tree does not become strong because people can see the roots developing. The roots grow quietly. The foundation forms before the results appear. Human development works in a similar way. The internal changes often happen before external evidence appears. You may become more patient before your circumstances improve. You may become more disciplined before your results become obvious. You may become more confident before anyone else notices. This is why relying only on external validation can create frustration. If your progress depends entirely on others noticing, you may abandon valuable growth simply because recognition has not arrived yet. A stronger approach is learning to measure progress through alignment. Are your actions becoming more consistent with your values? Are your choices becoming more intentional? Are you responding differently than you did before? Are you handling challenges with greater awareness? These questions reveal progress that numbers cannot always capture. Another hidden reason people remain stuck is that they have not clearly defined what they actually want. Many people chase goals they inherited from expectations around them. They pursue achievements because they believe they should. They follow paths because they appear impressive. They compare themselves to others without asking whether the destination actually matches their own priorities. A person can work extremely hard toward a goal that does not create genuine fulfillment. Effort alone is not enough. Direction matters. Imagine someone running with incredible speed, but heading in the wrong direction. Their effort is real. Their discipline is real. Their exhaustion is real. But the outcome may still disappoint them. This is why self-awareness must come before acceleration. Before asking, How can I move faster? Ask, am I moving toward something that truly matters to me? Clarity reduces wasted effort. It helps you invest energy where it creates meaningful results. Many people feel exhausted not because they are incapable. They are exhausted because their energy is scattered. They are responding to everything. They are focusing on too many priorities. They are allowing every distraction to compete for their attention. Attention is one of the most valuable resources a person has. What receives your attention receives your energy. What receives your energy has a greater chance of growing. This is why learning to protect your attention is a form of self-respect. Not because every distraction is harmful. Not because every moment must be optimized, but because a life without intentional focus can easily become a life shaped by whatever demands attention first. The person who is stuck often does not need more pressure. They need more clarity. They need to understand what matters. They need to understand what patterns are draining them. They need to understand which commitments deserve their effort, because confusion creates hesitation. And hesitation creates repetition. The same cycles continue when the same questions remain unanswered. But once you begin asking better questions, your decisions begin changing. Instead of asking, why am I not where I want to be? You begin asking, what behavior is creating my current reality? Instead of asking, why do I lack motivation? You begin asking, what system would make progress easier? Instead of asking, why am I behind? You begin asking, what is the next useful action I can take? These questions shift your mind from frustration toward problem solving. They move you from judgment toward understanding. And understanding creates options. The person who understands their patterns has more choices than the person who ignores them. Because awareness gives you the ability to interrupt automatic behavior. It gives you a moment between impulse and action. And within that moment is where change begins. A different future is rarely created by one massive decision. It is created by countless moments where you choose awareness over autopilot, where you choose patience over reaction, where you choose effort over avoidance, where you choose growth over comfort. The journey out of being stuck is not about becoming a completely different person. It is about becoming more intentional with the person you already are. And that process begins when you stop waiting for the perfect moment and start using the moment you have. Because the life you want is not built somewhere in the distant future. It is built through the choices you repeatedly make today. One of the deepest reasons people remain stuck is not a lack of desire for change. It is the conflict between the person they are today and the person they believe they should become. Inside many people exists a quiet struggle. One part wants growth. One part wants comfort. One part wants a new direction. One part wants to preserve everything familiar. This internal conflict can create confusion because both sides are trying to protect something important. The desire for growth protects your potential. The desire for comfort protects your sense of stability. Neither side is automatically the enemy. The challenge begins when comfort becomes the only priority. Comfort is valuable. Rest is valuable. Security is valuable. But a life built only around avoiding discomfort can slowly become smaller. The places where you grow are often the places where you experience uncertainty. The conversations where you develop courage are often the conversations you would prefer to avoid. The skills that create confidence are often the skills you initially struggle to learn. The habits that improve your life are often the habits that require effort before they become natural. Growth requires a willingness to enter the space between who you have been and who you are becoming. That space is uncomfortable because it contains uncertainty. You are no longer fully attached to the old version of yourself, but you have not yet fully developed the new one. This middle stage can feel confusing. Many people interpret it as failure. They think, I am trying, but I do not feel different yet. I have changed some things, but my results have not caught up. I know what I want, but I still struggle. But this stage is often part of the process. A person does not build strength by avoiding the stage where strength is developed. A person does not become skilled by skipping the stage where mistakes happen. A person does not become confident by avoiding situations where confidence is tested. The process itself creates the person. This is why patience with yourself matters. Not the kind of patience that becomes an excuse to stay comfortable. The kind of patience that allows you to continue improving without demanding instant transformation. Many people quit because they expect themselves to perform like an experienced person while they are still learning. They judge their beginning by the standards of someone who has already completed the journey. This creates unnecessary frustration. Imagine someone learning a new language. In the beginning, they make mistakes. They search for words. They misunderstand. They feel uncomfortable speaking. But those difficulties are not evidence that they should stop. They are evidence that learning is happening. Personal growth follows a similar pattern. Your mistakes are not always proof that you are failing. Sometimes they are evidence that you are practicing. A person who never makes mistakes may simply be staying within areas where they already feel capable. Growth requires expansion. Expansion requires stepping beyond what is familiar. This leads to another important truth. Many people are not afraid of failure itself. They are afraid of what failure might mean about them. A mistake can feel threatening when it becomes connected to identity. A person does not think, "This attempt did not work." They think, "I am someone who cannot succeed." A person does not think, "I need to improve this skill." They think, "I am not talented enough." The problem is not the mistake. The problem is the interpretation. When every setback becomes a judgment about your worth, you create an emotional burden that makes progress harder. A healthier perspective separates performance from identity. You can make a poor decision without being a poor person. You can experience failure without becoming a failure. You can struggle with a skill without lacking the ability to develop it. This separation creates emotional flexibility. It allows you to learn without destroying your confidence. The people who make progress are not necessarily those who avoid setbacks. They are often those who recover from setbacks with greater understanding. They ask, "What happened? What can I improve? What information does this experience provide?" They do not waste energy creating a permanent identity from a temporary outcome. This mindset creates resilience. Resilience is not the absence of difficulty. It is the ability to continue responding constructively when difficulty appears. Another reason people remain stuck is because they underestimate how much their environment influences their behavior. Human beings are affected by the systems around them, the people they spend time with, the information they consume, the spaces they create, the routines they repeat, the expectations they accept. This does not mean you have no personal responsibility. It means awareness of your environment gives you more ability to make intentional choices. A person trying to improve focus while constantly surrounding themselves with distractions may find the process unnecessarily difficult. A person trying to build a new habit without changing the conditions around that habit may rely on willpower alone, and willpower is limited. A more effective approach is often designing conditions that support the behavior you want to develop. If you want to read more, make reading easier to begin. If you want to practice a skill, reduce the barriers between you and practice. If you want to improve your health, create routines that make healthier choices more accessible. Small environmental changes can influence repeated behavior. The goal is not to create a perfect environment. Perfection is unrealistic. The goal is to create an environment that makes progress more likely. This is an important shift, because many people think discipline means constantly fighting themselves. They imagine a disciplined person as someone who forces themselves through endless resistance. But effective discipline often includes intelligent design. It includes understanding yourself. It includes reducing unnecessary obstacles. It includes creating systems where the desired action becomes easier to repeat. A person who builds supportive systems does not need to rely entirely on emotion. They create conditions where their better choices have a stronger chance of becoming normal. This is one reason successful change often feels less dramatic than people expect. The biggest improvements are frequently created through small adjustments repeated over time. A person does not suddenly become organized. They create organizing habits. A person does not suddenly become focused. They create focused routines. A person does not suddenly become confident. They collect experiences that build trust in their own ability to handle challenges. Confidence is often a result, not a requirement. Many people wait until they feel confident before taking action. But confidence often develops because they take action. Every time you follow through on a meaningful commitment, you send yourself evidence. Every time you face something difficult and respond effectively, you strengthen your belief that you can handle challenges. This is how self-trust is built. Not through positive statements alone, through repeated experiences. A person begins trusting themselves when their actions repeatedly support their intentions. This creates a powerful internal relationship. You become someone who believes your own promises, and that changes how you approach life. Because one of the most painful experiences is losing trust in yourself. It happens when you repeatedly make commitments and repeatedly abandon them. You tell yourself you will start. You tell yourself you will change. You tell yourself this time will be different. But when actions do not follow, disappointment builds. The solution is not making bigger promises. The solution is making smaller promises that you can consistently keep. A person rebuilding self-trust should begin with commitments that are realistic, not because they are lowering their standards, because they are rebuilding reliability. A small commitment completed creates momentum. A large commitment abandoned creates frustration. Progress requires honesty about your current capacity. If you can consistently do something small, you create evidence. Evidence creates confidence. Confidence creates willingness to attempt more. This is how lasting change develops, not through self-punishment, through self-respect. Respecting yourself means being honest about where you are, while still believing in your ability to improve. It means acknowledging weaknesses without allowing them to become permanent labels. It means accepting responsibility without creating unnecessary shame. The person who grows is not the person who never struggles. The person who grows is the person who learns how to respond to struggle. They understand that difficult moments are part of the process. They understand that progress is rarely a straight line. They understand that becoming better requires repetition. The most important question is not, why am I not already the person I want to be? The better question is, what action would the person I want to become take today? Not someday, not when everything becomes easier. Today, because identity is built through present choices. Every decision is a vote for the person you are becoming. You do not need every answer before you begin. You need enough awareness to take the next responsible step. And that next step, repeated enough times, becomes a path. The person who is stuck often believes they need a breakthrough, but many times what they need is consistency. They need to stop searching for the perfect moment and start respecting ordinary moments. Because ordinary moments are where transformation quietly happens. The future is shaped in small decisions that appear insignificant at the time. The 5 minutes of effort, the decision to begin, the choice to continue, the willingness to learn, the courage to face what has been avoided. These moments do not look powerful individually, but together they create a different life. The person who understands this stops waiting for change to happen. They begin participating in it, and that is the beginning of freedom from being stuck. Not because every challenge disappears, but because you become more capable of meeting challenges with clarity, patience, and purpose. There is a stage in personal growth where the greatest challenge is no longer knowing what needs to change. The challenge becomes accepting that change requires letting go. Not everything that belongs to your past can accompany you into your future. Some habits must be released. Some assumptions must be questioned. Some identities must be updated. And this is difficult because human beings naturally create attachments to familiar versions of themselves, even when those versions limit them. A person can become attached to being the one who struggles. They can become attached to the story that things are always difficult. They can become attached to the belief that they are simply not capable of certain things. These stories often develop slowly. They are created through repeated experiences, emotional moments, and interpretations of the past. Eventually, they begin to feel like facts. But a story repeated many times is not automatically the complete truth. Sometimes it is simply a perspective that has never been examined. One of the most powerful things a person can do is question the assumptions that guide their decisions, not with criticism, with curiosity. Ask yourself, what belief is influencing this choice? What am I assuming about myself? What am I assuming about what is possible? What evidence supports this belief, and what evidence challenges it? These questions create space between you and your automatic thinking. Without this space, people often live according to old conclusions. A person who experienced failure may conclude they should avoid trying again. A person who experienced rejection may conclude they should avoid vulnerability. A person who experienced difficulty may conclude they are not suited for challenges. But one experience does not have to become a permanent definition. The mind learns from experiences. But learning requires interpretation, and interpretations can be updated. This is a crucial part of psychological flexibility, the ability to recognize that your current perspective may not represent the full picture. Many people remain stuck because they are loyal to conclusions they formed during earlier stages of life. They continue following rules they created years ago. I cannot do that. That is not for someone like me. I am too old to start. I am too far behind. I missed my chance. These thoughts often feel realistic because they contain a small element of truth. Maybe something is difficult. Maybe the timing is not ideal. Maybe the path requires more effort. But difficulty is not the same as impossibility. A challenge can be real without becoming a permanent limitation. This distinction changes how you approach obstacles. Instead of asking, "Can I avoid difficulty?" you begin asking, "Can I develop the ability to handle difficulty?" This is a more empowering question, because many valuable outcomes require abilities that are not present at the beginning. You do not become ready and then take on challenges. Often, you take on appropriate challenges and become more ready through experience. This is how capability develops. A person learns patience by practicing patience. A person learns communication by practicing communication. A person learns discipline by practicing discipline. The skill grows through use. Another major reason people remain stuck is because they underestimate the role of emotional regulation. Many decisions are not made based on what people logically believe. They are influenced by emotional states. When people feel overwhelmed, they may avoid. When people feel discouraged, they may quit. When people feel uncertain, they may return to familiar patterns. Emotions are powerful. But emotions are temporary states. A feeling can be intense without being a complete representation of reality. This is why emotional awareness matters. The goal is not to remove emotions. The goal is to understand them. A person who can recognize their emotions creates more options. They can say, "I am feeling frustrated, but I do not need to react immediately. I am feeling afraid, but I can still take a thoughtful step. I am feeling uncertain, but I can gather information and continue." This ability creates a pause between emotion and action, and within that pause exists choice. Many people believe discipline means forcing themselves regardless of how they feel. But a deeper form of discipline involves understanding how you feel and choosing your response intentionally. It is not emotional suppression, it is emotional leadership. You acknowledge the feeling. You respect the information it provides. Then you decide what action aligns with your values and long-term goals. This is a skill that develops over time. It requires practice. It requires patience. It requires learning from moments where you react differently than you would have preferred. Because self-awareness does not mean you become perfect. It means you become more aware of your patterns, and awareness gives you the ability to improve. Another obstacle that keeps people stuck is the search for certainty. Many people want guarantees before they act. They want to know that their effort will succeed. They want proof that their decision will work. They want confidence that the outcome will match their expectations. But meaningful decisions often involve uncertainty. No person has complete information about the future. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty. The goal is to make thoughtful decisions despite uncertainty. This is what mature decision-making requires. You gather information. You consider consequences. You reflect on your values. You take reasonable action. Then you adjust based on what you learn. Life is not a test where every answer must be known before you begin. It is often a process of learning through participation. Many people delay progress because they are waiting for a level of certainty that rarely arrives. They are waiting for the moment when fear disappears. They are waiting for the moment when every doubt is gone. But growth usually begins before complete confidence exists. The person who improves their life is often not the person who has no uncertainty. It is the person who has learned how to move forward while uncertainty exists. This does not mean ignoring warning signs. Discernment matters. Thoughtfulness matters. Planning matters. But there is a difference between careful consideration and endless hesitation. Careful consideration leads to action. Endless hesitation protects the current situation. The question becomes, am I gathering information to make a better decision? Or, am I gathering information because making a decision feels uncomfortable? That question reveals a lot, because sometimes the obstacle is not lack of knowledge, it is emotional resistance. And emotional resistance requires a different solution. It requires compassion combined with honesty. You do not need to attack yourself for struggling, but you also cannot allow understanding yourself to become an excuse for staying unchanged. Self-compassion and accountability belong together. Compassion says, I understand why this pattern developed. Accountability says, I am responsible for what I do next. Both are necessary. Without compassion, growth becomes a constant battle against yourself. Without accountability, growth becomes a collection of good intentions without action. The balanced approach is to understand the past while building the future. Your past can explain you, but it does not have to control every decision you make. Your previous experiences influence you, but they do not remove your ability to learn. Your current habits describe where you are, but they do not have to determine where you go. This is the beginning of personal transformation, not the creation of a completely new person, the development of a more conscious person, a person who notices patterns, a person who makes intentional decisions, a person who accepts responsibility, a person who understands that progress is built through repeated choices. The journey out of being stuck is not about fighting yourself. It is about becoming aligned with yourself. Your actions begin matching your values. Your routines begin supporting your goals. Your decisions begin reflecting the person you want to become. And slowly, something changes. The struggle does not disappear completely. Challenges remain. Uncertainty remains. Growth remains a process. But your relationship with those challenges changes. You stop seeing every obstacle as a reason to retreat. You begin seeing obstacles as opportunities to develop capability. You stop asking, why is this so difficult? And begin asking, what ability is this difficulty asking me to build? That question transforms the way you experience life. Because the person who is stuck sees difficulty as a wall. The person who is growing sees difficulty as a training ground. Not because challenges are easy. Not because every struggle has an immediate lesson, but because every experience can provide information when approached with awareness. And awareness is what turns obstacles into opportunities for growth. The path forward is not found by waiting until you become fearless. It is found by becoming someone who can act wisely, even when fear exists. That is where real strength begins. There is a point in every serious attempt at change where the excitement fades. The beginning feels powerful. A new goal creates energy. A new idea creates hope. A new plan creates a feeling that something different is finally possible. But then reality arrives. The routine becomes difficult. The results appear slower than expected. The motivation becomes quieter. The old habits begin calling your attention again. This is the stage where many people return to where they started. Not because they did not want change, not because they lacked potential, but because they misunderstood what real progress feels like. Many people expect transformation to feel constantly inspiring. They imagine that once they discover the right goal, the right method, or the right mindset, everything will become easier. But meaningful change often becomes challenging after the initial excitement disappears. And this is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you have reached the part where commitment matters more than emotion. Anyone can act when motivation is high. The deeper test is whether you can continue when the emotional reward becomes smaller. This is where identity begins to change. A person who only acts when they feel motivated is controlled by temporary states. A person who develops consistency learns to act according to commitment. This does not mean becoming rigid. It does not mean ignoring your needs or forcing yourself without consideration. It means understanding that your feelings and your goals will not always move together. Some days you will feel ready. Some days you will feel uncertain. Some days you will feel tired. The difference between staying stuck and moving forward is often what you choose to do during those ordinary moments. Because life is mostly made of ordinary moments. The dramatic moments receive attention. The major decisions receive recognition. But character is developed quietly. It is developed when you choose the useful action, even when nobody notices. It is developed when you follow through on a small commitment. It is developed when you return to the process after a setback. This is why consistency is more powerful than intensity. Intensity creates a strong beginning. Consistency creates a lasting direction. A person can completely change their routine for 1 week and then return to old patterns. Another person can make small improvements and maintain them for years. The second person often creates greater transformation because repetition compounds. Small actions become habits. Habits become systems. Systems influence identity. Identity influences future choices. This is why the question should not only be, what can I achieve? A deeper question is, what kind of person am I practicing becoming? Because every repeated action is training. Every response teaches your mind something. Every choice reinforces a pattern. When you repeatedly avoid difficult tasks, avoidance becomes easier. When you repeatedly face challenges thoughtfully, courage becomes more familiar. When you repeatedly break commitments to yourself, self-doubt grows. When you repeatedly keep commitments, self-trust strengthens. Your behavior is shaping you. This is not a reason to judge yourself harshly. It is a reason to recognize your influence over your own development. You are not powerless against your patterns. You are the person capable of changing them. But change requires honesty, and honesty requires looking at the areas where you may be protecting comfort at the expense of growth. One of the most common examples is the desire for immediate results. People often abandon valuable efforts because progress does not happen quickly enough. They start learning something new. They practice for a short period. They do not see dramatic improvement. They decide it is not working. But many abilities develop slowly before they become visible. A person building physical strength does not see every internal adaptation. A person improving communication does not notice every small improvement. A person developing discipline does not immediately feel like a disciplined person. The process often feels ordinary before the results become obvious. This is why patience is not passive. Patience is active endurance. It is continuing the process while allowing time for development. It is understanding that growth has a timeline. A seed does not become a tree because someone demands faster growth. The conditions must support development. The process must unfold. Human improvement works similarly. There are actions you control. There are conditions you can influence. But there is also time. Respecting time is part of maturity. Another reason people remain stuck is because they focus too much on what they lack. They compare themselves to people who appear further ahead. They notice their weaknesses more than their progress. They focus on the distance remaining instead of the distance already traveled. Comparison can provide information. It can show possibilities. It can inspire learning. But comparison becomes harmful when it turns into a constant measurement of personal worth. Your journey has different variables, different experiences, different responsibilities, different starting points. The goal is not to ignore others. The goal is to use comparison wisely. Learn from people. Observe what works. Gather ideas. But return your attention to your own process. Because the person who is constantly looking sideways often loses awareness of their own direction. Progress requires attention, and attention requires being present with your own choices. Another important shift is understanding that discipline is not about becoming a completely controlled person. It is about becoming a more intentional person. A person with discipline still experiences distractions. They still experience uncertainty. They still experience difficult emotions. The difference is that they have practiced returning to what matters. Discipline is not perfection. It is recovery. It is the ability to return after interruption. This matters because many people abandon themselves after a mistake. They miss one day. They break one promise. They make one poor decision. Then they think, I failed. But a single mistake does not need to become a pattern. The next decision still matters. The next action still counts. A person who falls once and returns quickly is building a different skill from someone who expects themselves never to fall. The goal is not to create a life without mistakes. The goal is to create a life where mistakes do not stop progress. This requires emotional maturity. It requires learning not to make temporary experiences permanent. A difficult day is not a difficult life. A setback is not a final result. A slow period is not the end of the journey. Your ability to continue is one of the greatest advantages you can develop, because many goals are not achieved by the person who begins with the most talent. They are often achieved by the person who continues learning longer. Persistence creates opportunities that impatience removes. This is why quitting too early is one of the hidden reasons people remain stuck. They leave before the process has time to work. They judge the beginning as if it represents the entire journey. They underestimate how much can change through consistent effort. Imagine someone learning a musical instrument. At first, every mistake is obvious. The fingers feel unfamiliar. The progress feels slow. But with practice, the movements become easier. The person does not become better because they discovered a secret. They become better because they stayed engaged with the process. Life improvement often works the same way. There is no single moment where everything changes. There is a gradual accumulation of better choices. A person becomes more confident by collecting experiences. A person becomes more capable by developing skills. A person becomes more disciplined by practicing discipline. The process creates the result. This is why you should be careful about searching endlessly for a shortcut. Shortcuts can be useful when they remove unnecessary difficulty. But shortcuts cannot replace development. You cannot outsource the experience of becoming stronger. You cannot borrow someone else's discipline. You cannot skip every uncomfortable stage and still expect the lessons those stages provide. Growth belongs to the person who participates in the process. This is also why patience with yourself is essential. The person you are becoming requires time. You are learning. You are adjusting. You are developing. You are discovering which methods work for your situation. The goal is not to become someone who never struggles. The goal is to become someone who responds to struggle differently. Someone who does not immediately retreat. Someone who does not define themselves by setbacks. Someone who understands that progress is created through repeated choices. The person who stops being stuck is not the person who finds a perfect path. They are the person who learns to walk the path they choose. They become more intentional, more aware, more responsible, more patient, and eventually they look back and realize something important. The person they wanted to become was not created in one extraordinary moment. That person was built through thousands of ordinary decisions. The decision to begin, the decision to continue, the decision to learn, the decision to try again, the decision to stop waiting for a different life and start participating in creating one, because the most powerful change often begins quietly. It begins when a person stops asking for permission to grow and starts accepting responsibility for the next step. There is a final barrier that many people must face before they truly move forward. It is not a lack of information. It is not a lack of opportunity. It is not even always a lack of discipline. It is the difficulty of accepting that the person you want to become requires a different relationship with yourself. Many people spend years fighting themselves. They criticize themselves into action. They pressure themselves into improvement. They believe that being harsh is the only way to become better. But constant internal conflict creates exhaustion. A person can become so focused on what is wrong with them that they lose the ability to clearly see what is possible for them. Growth does require honesty. It requires acknowledging weaknesses. It requires recognizing patterns that need to change. But honesty without respect becomes destructive. The goal is not to become your own enemy. The goal is to become your own most responsible supporter. A strong mind is not built by constant self-attack. It is built through awareness, accountability, and consistent action. This is an important distinction, because many people confuse being hard on themselves with being committed. They believe that if they criticize themselves enough, they will finally become different. But criticism often creates a cycle. A person feels disappointed. They attack themselves. The emotional pressure becomes overwhelming. They seek relief. They return to old habits. Then the cycle repeats. The problem is not a lack of desire. The problem is that the method creates too much internal resistance. A better approach is constructive accountability. Constructive accountability asks, what happened? What can I learn? What adjustment will improve the next attempt? This approach does not remove responsibility. It improves responsibility, because a person who understands themselves can make better decisions than a person who only judges themselves. Self-awareness is not weakness. It is strategy. Knowing your tendencies allows you to prepare. Knowing your triggers allows you to respond intentionally. Knowing your limitations allows you to create realistic systems. A person who understands themselves does not need to pretend they have no weaknesses. They simply stop allowing weaknesses to control their direction. This is a major shift. Many people spend their lives trying to hide their imperfections. They want to appear confident. They want to appear successful. They want to appear as if they have everything figured out. But the pursuit of appearing complete can prevent the process of becoming better. Real growth requires humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is seeing yourself accurately. It is recognizing both your strengths and your areas for improvement. It is being willing to learn. It is being willing to admit when something is not working. It is being willing to change your approach. The person who believes they already know everything has little room to grow. The person who remains curious creates endless opportunities to improve. This curiosity is especially important because life does not remain the same. Your responsibilities change. Your environment changes. Your priorities change. The strategies that worked in one season of life may require adjustment in another. A mature person understands that growth is not a destination. It is an ongoing process of adaptation. This removes a common source of frustration. Many people think, once I fix this problem, life will finally become easy. But life continues presenting new challenges. The goal is not to create a life without challenges. The goal is to become more capable of responding to challenges. A person who develops emotional strength does not avoid every difficult moment. They learn how to navigate difficult moments. A person who develops discipline does not eliminate distractions. They learn how to return their attention. A person who develops confidence does not remove uncertainty. They learn how to act thoughtfully despite uncertainty. This is the difference between chasing a perfect state and building a reliable process. Perfection is fragile. Processes are adaptable. A perfect person does not exist. But a person committed to improvement can continue developing throughout life. Another important part of moving forward is learning to make peace with your previous decisions. Many people remain stuck because they are constantly fighting their past. They replay mistakes. They regret missed opportunities. They imagine different versions of what could have happened. Reflection can be valuable. Learning from the past can guide future choices. But living permanently inside previous moments prevents attention from being used where it matters most. The present is where change happens. You cannot rewrite previous decisions, but you can influence future ones. The question is not, why was I not better before? The question is, what can I do with what I understand now? This question creates movement. It transforms regret into responsibility. It transforms the past from a prison into a lesson. Everyone has moments they would handle differently with greater knowledge. That is part of being human. The purpose of growth is not to become someone who never made mistakes. It is to become someone who learns from them. That this is why forgiveness toward your past self can be powerful. Not because every decision was correct, not because every action should be ignored, but because growth requires moving forward. A person carrying endless shame carries unnecessary weight. A person carrying lessons carries wisdom. The difference is how they relate to the past. One keeps looking backward. The other uses the past as information while continuing forward. This leads to one of the most important truths about escaping stagnation. You must become willing to disappoint the version of yourself that wants comfort more than growth. The part of you that wants to avoid difficulty will always have arguments. It will remind you of risks. It will highlight uncertainty. It will suggest waiting. Sometimes those signals are useful. Sometimes they help you make careful decisions. But sometimes they simply protect what is familiar. Growth requires learning which voice deserves attention. Not every thought requires action. Not every emotion requires obedience. Not every fear requires retreat. A person becomes stronger when they can experience internal resistance without automatically following it. This is emotional maturity. It is the ability to choose based on values rather than temporary impulses. And this ability develops through practice. Every time you pause before reacting, you practice awareness. Every time you complete a difficult task, you practice discipline. Every time you have an honest conversation, you practice courage. Every time you return after failure, you practice resilience. Small moments create larger abilities. This is why you should not underestimate simple decisions. A person's life direction is often changed through choices that appear ordinary. Choosing to learn instead of complain. Choosing to prepare instead of avoid. Choosing to communicate instead of assume. Choosing to act instead of endlessly analyze. Choosing to continue instead of quit. These choices may not create immediate transformation, but they create alignment, and alignment is powerful. When your actions repeatedly match your values, something changes internally. You begin trusting yourself. You begin respecting your own commitments. You begin seeing yourself as someone capable of growth. This identity shift is important, because the person who believes change is possible behaves differently from the person who believes they are permanently limited. The belief alone does not create results, but action creates results. But belief influences whether action continues. This is why developing a realistic belief in your ability to improve matters, not unrealistic confidence. Not pretending challenges do not exist. A grounded belief. The belief that skills can be developed. The belief that habits can change. The belief that mistakes can become lessons. The belief that your current situation is a starting point, not a final definition. This is where many people finally become unstuck. Not because all problems disappear, not because every decision becomes easy, but because they stop waiting to become a different person before taking responsibility. They understand that the person they want to become is built through the actions they take now. The future version of yourself is not created somewhere in the distance. That person is developed through today's choices, through the way you spend your attention, through through the way you respond to difficulty, through the commitments you keep, through the standards you practice. The brutal truth about being stuck is that nobody can walk the path for you. Advice can guide you, knowledge can support you, others can encourage you, but the decision to participate in your own growth belongs to you. And that decision does not need to be dramatic. It can be quiet. It can happen in a normal moment, a moment when you choose differently than you usually do, a moment when you take one responsible action, a moment when you stop asking for the perfect circumstances and begin working with the circumstances you have. That is where change begins, not in a future version of life, not after everything becomes easier, here, now, with the next choice. Because a person is rarely transformed by one massive decision. A person is transformed by repeatedly choosing the direction they want to move, step by step, choice by choice, day by day, until one day they look back and realize they are no longer the person who felt trapped. They are the person who learned how to move, and that ability is one of the most valuable things anyone can develop. The ability to recognize where you are, the ability to choose where you want to go, and the ability to continue moving even when the path requires patience, because progress does not belong only to those who start with advantages. The progress belongs to those who remain willing to learn, adapt, and continue. There is a question that often arrives after a long period of feeling stuck. Not a question about success, not a question about achievement, a deeper question. Who am I becoming? Because eventually, every person must recognize that life is not only shaped by what happens around them, it is shaped by the relationship they build with themselves, the way they think, the way they respond, the way they handle difficulty, the way they treat their own commitments, the way they decide what deserves their energy. Being stuck can feel like a permanent condition. It can feel like evidence that something is wrong. It can feel like proof that you have fallen behind. But being stuck is often a signal that something needs attention, a signal that your current approach may no longer support the direction you want to move, a signal that your habits, beliefs, and choices may need to evolve. The important thing is not whether you have experienced periods of stagnation. Almost everyone does. The important thing is what you do when you recognize it. Do you continue repeating the same patterns? Do you continue waiting for circumstances to change first? Do you continue searching for a perfect solution that removes all difficulty? Or do you become willing to look honestly at yourself? Not with judgment, with awareness. Because awareness is where change begins. The person who understands their patterns gains the ability to influence them. The person who understands their emotions gains the ability to respond with greater intention. The person who understands their choices gains the ability to create a different direction. This is the foundation of personal growth. Not perfection, not having every answer, not becoming someone who never struggles. Growth is not the elimination of difficulty. Growth is becoming more capable when difficulty appears. The strongest people are not those who experience no uncertainty. They are often those who learn how to move responsibly through uncertainty. They understand that fear can exist alongside courage. They understand that mistakes can exist alongside progress. They understand that patience can exist alongside ambition. They understand that discipline can exist alongside flexibility. A meaningful life is not built by controlling every outcome. It is built by controlling what you can influence: your attention, your effort, your decisions, your habits, your response to challenges. These are the areas where your power exists. And when you focus there, you stop wasting energy fighting things you cannot change. You begin investing energy into things you can improve. This shift creates freedom, not because life becomes simple, but because your attention moves toward what creates progress. Remember the patterns that keep people stuck: avoidance, endless preparation without action, waiting for confidence before beginning, expecting motivation to appear before commitment, comparing your journey to someone else's, holding on to an outdated identity, These patterns are common because they are human. They are not signs of permanent weakness. They are signs that awareness is needed. The goal is not to become someone who never experiences these struggles. The goal is to recognize them sooner, to notice when you are moving away from what matters, to notice when comfort is replacing growth, to notice when fear is influencing decisions more than values. This awareness creates a turning point, because once you see a pattern clearly, you have more opportunity to respond differently. You create a space between what you feel and what you choose, and that space is where personal freedom develops. A person who lacks this awareness often feels controlled by circumstances. A person who develops this awareness begins creating intentional responses. The difference is not that one person has no challenges. The difference is that one person has developed a different relationship with challenges. They no longer see every obstacle as a reason to stop. They see obstacles as moments that require thought, patience, and adaptation. This does not mean every challenge has an easy answer. Some situations are genuinely difficult. Some goals require time. Some changes require repeated effort. But difficulty does not remove your ability to participate, and participation is where transformation happens. The person you want to become is not created by thinking about change. They are created through practicing change. Every time you choose the difficult but meaningful action, you strengthen that direction. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen self-trust. Every time you respond with patience instead of reaction, you strengthen emotional control. Every time you return after a setback, you strengthen resilience. These moments may appear small, but small moments repeated over time create significant results. A person's future is often built quietly, not through one dramatic event, through ordinary decisions made consistently. This is why you should not underestimate the next choice. The next choice may not change everything immediately, but it can change the direction you are moving, and direction matters. A person moving slowly in the right direction can eventually reach places that a person moving quickly without direction cannot. Progress is not always about speed. It is about alignment. Are your actions moving closer to your values? Are your habits supporting your goals? Are your decisions helping you become someone you respect? These questions are more valuable than constantly asking whether you have arrived, because personal growth is not a finish line. It is a continuous process of becoming more aware, more responsible, and more capable. There will be days when you feel strong. There will be days when you question yourself. There will be moments of progress. There will be moments where you need to adjust. This is normal. The measure of growth is not whether every day feels successful. The measure of growth is whether you continue returning to what matters. The ability to return is one of the most underrated strengths a person can develop. Return after disappointment. Return after mistakes. Return after losing focus. Return after uncertainty. The person who learns to return is difficult to keep down because they no longer depend on perfect conditions. They have learned how to continue, and continuing is often where transformation is created, where the brutal truth about why you are still stuck is not that you lack potential, it is that potential requires participation. Knowing what you could become is not enough. You must build the habits, decisions, and responses that move you in that direction. The distance between your current life and your desired life is often created through repeated moments. Moments where you choose comfort or growth, avoidance or responsibility, reaction or awareness, delay or action. The choice may seem small at the time, but small choices become patterns. Patterns become identity. Identity influences the future you create. So the question is not, can I completely change my life today? That question can feel overwhelming. A better question is, what is one responsible action I can take today? One action, one improvement, one decision, one step. Because progress does not require you to have everything figured out. It requires you to begin where you are. The person who is stuck often believes they need a completely new life, but sometimes what they need is a new relationship with the life they already have, a new relationship with effort, a new relationship with mistakes, a new relationship with discomfort, a new relationship with responsibility. When you stop seeing growth as a punishment and start seeing it as a process, something changes. You become less focused on proving yourself. You become more focused on developing yourself. You stop chasing an image. You start building substance. You stop asking whether you are already enough to begin. You begin understanding that growth itself is how you develop confidence. The journey forward will not always be comfortable, but comfort was never the true goal. The goal is capability, the ability to handle more, the ability to think clearly, the ability to respond wisely, the ability to continue becoming better. And perhaps the most important realization is this: you are not stuck because you are finished. You are stuck because something within your current approach is asking to be understood. Listen carefully, learn honestly, adjust patiently, move consistently. The person you become is not determined by one moment of inspiration. It is shaped by the choices you repeat. So choose carefully, not because every decision will be perfect, but because every decision is an opportunity to move closer to the person you want to become. The path forward begins with awareness. It continues with action, and it is built through consistency. One step, one choice, one day at a time.